Mindful of the body. A study guide prepared by Thanisaro Bhikkhu for free distribution. Contents: Introduction, the context, mindfulness immersed in the body, the advantages of mindfulness immersed in the body, the disadvantages of attachment to the body. Samatha, Vipassana, mindfulness, Jnana, discernment. Glossary. Introduction. Although early Buddhism is widely believed to take a negative attitude towards the body, the texts of the Pali Canon do not support this belief. They approach the body both in its positive role as an object of meditation to develop mindfulness, concentration and the mental powers based on concentration, and in its negative role as an object for unskillful states of mind. Even in its negative role, the body is not the culprit. The problem is the mind's attachment to the body. Once the body can be used in its positive role to develop mindfulness and concentration, those mental qualities can be used to free the mind of its attachment to the body. Then, as many a modern meditation master has noted, the mind and body can live in peace. This study guide focuses on the primary sutta in the Pali Canon dealing with the contemplation of the body, the discourse or mindfulness immersed in the body. The first section, the context, establishes the general principle underlying the practice of mindfulness immersed in the body, showing why attachment to the body is considered problematic in the first place. The second section presents the sutta itself. The remaining section expands on points raised in the sutta. Section 3 dealing with the advantage of practicing mindfulness immersed in the body, and Section 4 expanding on the drawbacks of attachment to the body. Because the sutta treats the body both as an object of mindfulness and as an object of jnana or mental absorption, it raises questions concerning the relationship between these two mental qualities in the practice of meditation. There is a widespread belief that they represent two sides of a great divide in Buddhist meditation practice, with mindfulness on one side, joined with vipassana, insight and discernment, and jnana on the other side, joined with the samatha, tranquility. The Pali Canon, however, presents a much more complex picture of the interrelated roles these mental qualities in the pursuit of awakening. And in fact, the great divide picture of Buddhist meditation practice conflicts what the Pali Canon treats as three separate, albeit related issues: the relationship between samatha and vipassana, the relationship between mindfulness and jnana, and the relationship between jnana and discernment. To convey the original parameters of these issues, this study guide ends with the three sections focused separately on these relationships. The first, samatha vipassana, shows how these terms refer not to separate classes of meditative exercises but to qualities of mind that ideally are developed in tandem as a necessary part of jnana practice, both prior to and building to the attainment of jnana. The next section, mindfulness, jnana, similarly shows how the practice of jnana and the practice of the four establishing of mindfulness, also called four frames of reference, are not radically separate. Instead, mindfulness practice is used specifically to develop jnana, whereas jnana practice on the attainment of the fourth jnana brings mindfulness to a state of purity. The final section, jnana discernment, shows how the attainment of jnana is used as a necessary basis for the development of liberating insight. This section concludes with a passage from MN 121 that ties all these themes together, showing how tranquility and insight mindfully act in tandem to develop and purify jnana states in such a way as to foster the discernment that issues in release. The context. Monks, I lived in refinement, utmost refinement, total refinement. My father even had lotus ponds made in our palace. One where red lotuses bloomed, one where white lotuses bloomed, and one where blue lotuses bloomed, all for my sake. I used no sandalwood that was not from Varanasi. My turban was from Varanasi, as were my tunic, my lower garments, and my outer cloak. A white sunshade was held over me day and night to protect me from cold, heat, dust, dirt, and dew. I had 3 palaces, one for the cold season, one for the hot season, one for the rainy season. During the 4 months of the rainy season, I was entertained in the rainy season palace by minstrels, without a single man among them, and I did not once come down from the palace. Whereas the servants, workers, and retainers in other people's homes are fed meals of lentil soup and broken rice, in my father's home the servants, workers, and retainers were fed wheat, rice, and meat. Even though I was endowed with such fortune, such a total refinement, the thought occurred to me when an untaught, run-of-the-mill person, himself subject to aging, not beyond aging, sees another who is aged, who is horrified, humiliated, and disgusted, oblivious to himself that he too is subject to aging, not beyond aging. If I, who am subject to aging, not beyond aging, were to be horrified, humiliated, and disgusted on seeing another person who is aged, that would not be fitting for me. As I noticed this, the typical young person's intoxication with youth entirely dropped away. Even though I was endowed with such fortune, such a total refinement, the thought occurred to me when an untaught, run-of-the-mill person, himself subject to illness, not beyond illness, sees another who is ill, who is horrified, humiliated, and disgusted, oblivious to himself that he too is subject to illness, not beyond illness. And if I, who am subject to illness, not beyond illness, were to be horrified, humiliated, and disgusted on seeing another person who is ill, that would not be fitting for me. As I noticed this, the healthy person's intoxication with health entirely dropped away. Even though I was endowed with such fortune, such a total refinement, the thought occurred to me when an untaught, run-of-the-mill person, himself subject to death, not beyond death, sees another who is dead, who is horrified, humiliated, and disgusted, oblivious to himself that he too is subject to death, not beyond death. And if I, who am subject to death, not beyond death, were to be horrified, humiliated, and disgusted on seeing another person who is dead, what would not be fitting for me? As I noticed this, the living person's intoxication with life entirely dropped away. Monks, there are these 3 forms of intoxication. Which 3? Intoxication with youth, intoxication with health, intoxication with life. Drunk with the intoxication of youth, an uninstructed run-of-the-mill person engages in bodily misconduct, verbal misconduct, and mental misconduct. Having engaged in bodily misconduct, verbal misconduct, and mental misconduct, he, on the breakup of the body after death, reappears in the plane of deprivation, the bad destination, the lower realms in hell. Drunk with the intoxication of health, an uni-instructed run-of-the-mill person engages in bodily misconduct, verbal misconduct, and mental misconduct. Having engaged in bodily misconduct, verbal misconduct, and mental misconduct, he, on the breakup of the body after death, reappears in the plane of deprivation, the bad destination, the lower realms, in hell, drunk with the intoxication of life. An uninstructed run-of-the-mill person engages in bodily misconduct, verbal misconduct, and mental misconduct. Having engaged in bodily misconduct, verbal misconduct, and mental misconduct, he, on the breakup of the body after death, reappears in the plane of deprivation, the bad destination, the lower realms, in hell. Before my awakening, when I was still an unawakened bodhisattva, being subject myself to birth, aging, illness, death, sorrow, and defilement, I sought happiness in what was subject to birth, aging, illness, death, sorrow, and defilement. The thought occurred to me, why am I, being subject myself to birth, defilement, seeking what is subject to birth, defilement? But if I were to seek the unborn, unaging, unailing, undying, sorrowless, undefined, unsurpassed security from bondage, unbinding. I tell you, friend, that it isn't possible by traveling to know or see or reach a far end of the cosmos where one doesn't take birth, age, die, pass away, or reappear. But at the same time, I tell you that there is no making an end of suffering and stress without reaching the end of the cosmos. Yet it is just within this fathom-long body, with its perception and intellect, that I declare that there is the cosmos, the origination of the cosmos, the cessation of the cosmos, and the path of practice leading to the cessation of the cosmos. Now, this is the noble truth of stress. Birth is stressful, aging is stressful, death is stressful, sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress, and despair are stressful. Association with the unbeloved is stressful. Separation from the loved is stressful. Not getting what is wanted is stressful. In short, the 5 clinging aggregates are stressful. And this is the noble truth of the origination of stress and craving that makes for further becoming, accompanied by passion and delight, relishing now here and now there, that is, craving for sensuality, craving for becoming, craving for non-becoming. And this is the noble truth of the cessation of stress, the reminderless fading and cessation, renunciation, relinquishment, release and letting go of that very craving. And this is the noble truth of the way of practice leading to the cessation of stress. Precisely this noble eightfold path: right view, right resolve, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. This noble truth of stress is to be comprehended. This noble truth of the origination of stress is to be abandoned. This noble truth of the cessation of stress is to be directly experienced. This noble truth of the way of practice leading to the cessation of stress is to be developed. And what monks is right view? Knowledge with regard to stress, knowledge with regard to the origination of stress, knowledge with regard to the stopping of stress, knowledge with regard to the way of practice leading to the stopping of stress. This monk is called right view. And what monks is right resolve? Being resolved on renunciation, on freedom from ill will, on harmlessness, this monk is called right resolve. And what monks is right speech? Abstaining from lying, abstaining from divisive speech, abstaining from abusive speech, abstaining from idle chatter. This monks is called right speech. And what monks is right action? Abstaining from taking life, abstaining from stealing, abstaining from sexual intercourse. This monks is called right action. And what monks is right livelihood? There is the case where a disciple of the noble ones, having abandoned dishonest livelihood, keeps his life going with right livelihood. This monks is called right livelihood. And what monks is right effort? There is the case where a monk generates desire, endeavors, activates persistence, upholds and exerts his intent for the sake of the non-arising of evil, unskillful qualities that have not yet arisen. He generates desire, endeavors, activates persistence, upholds and exerts his intent for the sake of the abandonment of evil, unskillful qualities that have arisen. He generates desire, endeavors, activates persistence, upholds and exerts his intent for the sake of the arising of skillful qualities that have not yet arisen. He generates desire, endeavors, activates persistence, upholds and exerts his intent for the maintenance, non-confusion, increase, plenitude, development and culmination of skillful qualities that have arisen. This monks is called right effort. And what monks is right mindfulness? There is the case where a monk remains focused on the body in and of itself, ardent, aware and mindful, putting away greed and distresses. With reference to the word, he remains focused on feelings in and of themselves, ardent, aware and mindful, putting away greed and distress. With reference to the word, he remains focused on the mind in and of itself, ardent, aware and mindful, putting away greed and distress. With reference to the word, he remains focused on mental qualities in and of themselves, ardent, aware and mindful, putting away greed and distress. With reference to the word, this monks is called right mindfulness. And what monks is right concentration? There is the case where a monk, quite withdrawn from sensuality, withdrawn from unskillful mental qualities, enters and remains in the first jnana, rapture and pleasure born from withdrawal, accompanied by directed thought and evaluation. With the stilling of directed thought and evaluation, he enters and remains in the second jnana, rapture and pleasure born of concentration, unification of awareness, free from directed thought and evaluation, internal assurance. With the fading of rapture, he remains in equanimity, mindful and fully aware and physically sensitive of pleasure. He enters and remains in the third jnana, of which the noble ones declare equanimous and mindful. He has a pleasurable abiding. With the abandoning of pleasure and pain, as with the earlier disappearance of elation and distress, he enters and remains in the fourth jnana, purity of equanimity and mindfulness, neither pleasure nor pain. This monks is called right concentration.